reason, and there was actually no sound. So I'm just going to try and talk over while the video is playing and explain what I'm doing as best I can. I know it's not going to be perfect, but it's a lot better than having no sound. So we'll go ahead and get started with the tutorial. So we've got our arms set up, they're all rigged now. We have our inverse kinematics, we have our elbow pole targets, we have our rotation constraints on our fingers, and today we're going to be animating the hands for our unarmed animations. So these will just be the animations where we're not holding a weapon or a gun or anything like that. So what we're going to do first before we start animating, the way we've got the inverse kinematics set up, I'm not happy with how they are at the moment, so we're just going to reduce the chain length a little bit. So if you click on your left arm on the inverse kinematics on the forearm, you'll see the dotted line that goes up all the way up to basically the collarbone, or the end of the collarbone up there, and I actually want to shorten that so it's not going so far up the arm, because we don't really want to be moving the bones all the way up there when we pose our arms. We basically just want to move the actual arm itself. So if you just go to your bone constraints and then click on where it says chain length, you can actually change the length of this chain. So we're going to change it to 4 for the way we've got our arms set up. And as you can see now, it actually only goes 4 bones from the actual forearm where we've got our inverse kinematics. So left click on the right arm as well and do the same thing. Change the chain length to 4, and you'll see that you've done it right, because you can see the dotted line actually only goes up to the top of the arm. The bone just above where the mesh of the arm is actually cut off. So yeah, the animations we're going to do are idle, punch, unequip, and an equip. So that's all we're going to need for now, and that'll get us started. Hopefully in the next episode we can take this into Unity and start setting it up. So if you go up the top, you'll see the tabs there. You can click on animation and it'll bring up the animation editor here. So you've basically got your screen split into different types. You've got the camera on the left hand side there. On the right hand side you've actually got the arm showing, and then down the bottom at the moment we've currently got the dope sheet, and underneath that we've got the playback editor. So the playback editor is just like in Unity. You can record your keyframes automatically, and you can play the actual animation clips and things like that. So I'm just turning on my screencast keys so you guys can see what keys I'm pressing. And then if you go to the left hand side here, you can actually drag out your tools. So you've got your movement tool and your rotation tools, etc. So that might make it a little bit easier to animate. It is a bit tricky if you haven't done this before, and I'm definitely no expert at it. So just try to take your time. I'm going to try to do mine as fast as I can, but yeah, take your time. If you click on the dope sheet there, you can actually change that one to the action editor, and then if you go down the bottom here, you can actually pull up the playback editor as well, so we can see them a bit more clearly. So in your action editor window now, you go to new, the one little tab above, and we're actually going to store these animations under one heading. So you click on the new button, you can change the name from action to unarmed, click on the little shield icon to the right of that, And yeah, as I said, we'll store all of our 4 animations under this one heading. So what you can also do now is you can start to begin to pose your arms. Like currently the arms are just down the side of our player, so we actually want to move them into some type of position that's going to be like the default position that you see. So yeah, as I said, it can be a little bit tricky to do this, so just take your time. You'll see that I'm actually no expert at doing this either. It's it's something that you really need to spend the time to get good animations. So you can't just expect to have AAA animations by animating for like 20 minutes for 4 animations. You you really need to just take your time, and as you go along just adjust it and get it looking as good as you can. If anyone wants to download these arms once I've fully got them done, you can get them off my Patreon. Just support me on Patreon and you'll be able to get a link to download off itch.io. So basically I'm just going into front view. I press 1 on my numpad. I'm going to left click on the inverse kinematics handle and press G, and then I'm just going to drag the arms a bit more into the middle so they're a bit closer together. As you can see, like when you drag them in, your wrists get a bit deformed, so you've got to make sure that you actually rotate the wrists and things as well as you go along. So if you click on the kinematic handle, you can press R and you can rotate with R, or you can use the rotate tool up there on the left hand side, and up the top here you've got global and local, so you can actually rotate it on the global axis or you can rotate it on the local axis. So it's just your preference. I mean, whatever you think works better. I'm just moving the arms up a little bit now. Just using G. I'm holding onto the handle and just pressing G. I'm just trying to get them somewhere in view on the left hand side here. They don't have to be like right in that camera because we can always adjust it in Unity, no problem. So I just want the hands roughly so I can see them on the left hand side of the screen here. So I'm pressing 3 to go into side view, and then I press 9 on the numpad to actually switch to the other side. So just trying to keep rotating so that the as you can see, the wrists look a little bit deformed, so you just got to keep rotating and moving them until you get them how you want them so that they look half decent. So now when I press G and actually pull this out a bit, it should sort of look a little bit better. You can see that the arms are really close to the camera, so you don't really want that. You actually want them to be out a bit. So I'm actually going to go ahead and I think pull them out like that. The reason you want that is because when you go into Unity, you don't want to have the arms too close to the camera because you'll end up seeing like where the arms cut off and things like that. So make sure your arms are like pulled out a little bit. So it's just a matter, just keep doing this, keep pressing G to grab, and just move the arms into position. I just basically want one on the left hand side of the screen and one on the right hand side of the screen, and you can just sort of rotate them how you want them to sort of appear. So as you can see, like I'm actually doing mine quite fast, so you could spend a lot more time. If you want to pause the video, if you don't have yours posed by the time I finish posing mine, just pause the video and just spend some time until you get it how you want. So I think I'm just going to rotate this one a little bit so the hands kind of turned over a little bit. I just want them so that they're actually on the edges of the screen. I don't want them too close together. Don't know if you guys can hear, but in the background, that's my new son. He was only born 6 days ago, so have a new baby in the house again. So that's why I haven't uploaded a video last week. Sorry guys, but I'm gonna definitely keep onto it. Okay, so the hands are positioned basically where I want them. And now what you can actually do to make life a bit easier, you can actually save poses. So if you go to the little man on the right hand side there, and you go to this screen and press A to select all your bones, and you can actually go to the pose library. So you open up the pose library, click on new, and you can change the name to whatever you want. I'm going to call mine Unarmed Pose Lib. And then click on the shield on the right hand side, and then you click on the plus button to have a new pose. And you can double click on that to change the name. I'm going to call this my default pose. And then of course, while all the bones are selected, you can click on the apply pose, and now this pose should be stored under our default pose in the pose library, which is really handy because anytime we want, we can go back to this pose. So if you see here, if you press G and move the arm and then press A, you got to select all the bones, make sure on default, and then click apply pose again. Automatically we go back to our default pose. So this is really handy if you're doing lots of animations, so that you can actually switch between different poses at any time instead of having to reposition everything, which as you can see takes someone that's inexperienced like me quite a long time. So down the bottom here you can see on our playback window here we have we're starting on frame 1 and it goes all the way to 250. So you probably don't want 250 frames to start off with because you're going to have to play through that every single time that you want to test out your animation. So you can change the frames here. I'm going to change mine to 90. So this idle animation is going to be 90 frames long. I like my idle animation to be quite long and to be very subtle and slow. I don't recommend that you try to do too much for your idle animation. It usually doesn't turn out that good, especially for new. So make sure you go down the bottom here and click on auto keys. This is extremely important. You got to click on that auto keys button, the little round record circle, and with everything selected, press A in the actual view where you see your arms. You have to do it here, and then you press I in this window and select location rotation, lock rot. So basically, as you can see in our action editor, now we have keyframes for the actual pose that our arms are in. It's got a keyframe for all the location and rotations of every bone in that window. So now you can move to about halfway. I'm just going to go to about 45 frames, and we can start to animate the actual arms how we want for the idle animation. So what I'm going to do is just try to make it look like the player's actually just breathing. I'm not going to do anything real fancy, so I'm left clicking on the inverse kinematic handle and then holding shift and left clicking on the other one. And what I'm going to do is press G and then Z, and I'm just going to lift them up slightly. So G to grab and Z to actually just move it on the Z axis, which is straight up and down in Blender. So what I'm going to do now is just use our rotation constraints on our fingers that we made in the last video and actually just rotate on the x-axis, because remember our fingers only rotate on the x-axis because we have actually confined them or constrained them so that they won't rotate on the z or y. So I'm just slightly moving the fingers just a little bit, okay? I'm not doing anything crazy. I just want it to look like the player is actually alive. He's not like some type of mannequin. So I just moved the two fingers there that you can actually see in the left hand side view. I'm just going to slightly move the thumb on his right hand. Like so. Also going to just rotate his index finger a little bit. And his middle finger as well, so you can just see that come through on the left hand side there. And that's all I really need to do, because you won't see the other fingers in this animation, so that's fine. And then just left click on 90, so the end of our first animation, and then A to select all the bones, and in our pose library, if we press apply, you'll see that it automatically takes us back to our default pose. So this is one way to do it. You can also do this a different way if you want the same frames on the start and on the end. So what you can do is A to select all your bones, and then what we'll do is delete the keyframes we just made on the 90 there. See, left click on them and then delete. And what you can do also is go to the very first frames on our action editor, left click on them, press Shift D to duplicate, and then just pull them across with your mouse and drag them to the 90 position. So now that's exactly the same as what we just did. So the frames that we start on and the frames that we end on are exactly the same, okay? They're the default pose. So as you can see, it just looks like he's breathing. His fingers move slightly, and that's all we really need. So you can actually play the animation by pressing play, and that's what it's going to look like in the game. It's probably even a little bit too much. You could probably like have it so it wasn't he wasn't moving quite as much as that. I would like it a little bit more subtle than that, but that'll be fine. So now what we want to do is our punch animation. So we're going to want that to be about 20 frames. So we can actually go down and change the amount of frames for our animation down the bottom. It's currently set on 90 now, so we can go down and change that to about 120 or so. I'm just explaining to you now that it's actually hard to pose fists, so it will take some practice. I'm just going to change the bones now, I think, the viewport display, and I'm going to change them back to stick. I test out a few here. You can change whatever you want, but I just want them to be on stick so that it's a little bit easier. The octathedral bones style actually it gets in the way, and you can't actually see the mesh properly, and you can't see if the mesh is actually going into the other mesh. Like you can't see if you've curled his finger too far in or something like that. So I'm just going to change the bone style back to stick, and I think that makes it a bit easier. So come down the bottom here, and we're just going to extend the length of the amount of frames that's in our animation. So I'm going to change it from 90 to 110, sorry, yeah, so 20, it's going to be 20 frames. It'll actually be 19 frames because it's going to start on 91. I was actually supposed to drag excuse me, I was actually supposed to drag this up a little bit further. You should do this animation on about the 100th frame, okay? But it's not a problem. You can actually just drag the frames up, but yeah, probably drag yours to about 100 before you start posing for our punch. So basically the idea with this animation is I kind of wanted it to be like he's defending or fending off with his left arm, like that's going to be kind of under his chin on his left side, and then with his right arm he's going to be throwing a straight punch. I don't know if you guys know anything about boxing, but that's basically what you want to be doing. If you're throwing a punch with your right hand, you want your left hand to be either guarding your chin or in a pose ready to knock away any income punches or parry them. So we're going to try to mimic that here. I'm just using the G key to grab on the actual inverse kinematic handle, and I'm trying to position it somewhere where it looks decent on the left hand side. Ideally in real life you'd want your hand to be like closer to your chin, but for animating and how it's going to look in Unity, we don't want to bring the actual left hand too far or too close to the camera, because it'll look really big and it won't look great. So basically just trying to position it somewhere where it looks good there on the left hand side. I'm going to slightly just rotate the fingers a little bit so that it looks like we're actually ready to catch a punch or fend off a punch or an attack that's coming our way. So just keep clicking on our fingers, use the rotation tool and rotate on the X, and just try to get it how you want. I'm just playing around with the actual distance here, and as you can see, if you move it too close to the actual camera, see how the hand looks absolutely massive. It doesn't look great, so I'm going to move it back out again a little bit further. Even though it's not realistic, it just looks better in the camera view. So just take your time, just keep pressing G to move it, and switching between your side views with 3 and 9 to switch from the left side view to the right side view in orthographic, which makes it a bit easier to actually rotate and move things. Okay, so once you've got your left hand kind of positioned how you want it, then we can press G on the right hand and just try to extend that out. If you pull it too far, you can see actually stretch the mesh. So just pull it out as far as you can that it still looks good, and I'm just going to press 1 for front view, use G to drag it into the center a little bit more. I'm still selected on the inverse kinematic handle, and I'm just going to use the rotation to kind of turn the wrist over so it looks like he's actually throwing a straight right. So this is all your preference, obviously, just how you want it to look. I'm just trying to do mine as fast as I can. The way I'm posing this right hand, I'm making it a bit easier on myself so I don't have to worry about getting his fist to look absolutely perfect, because you'll only sort of see it from this view. You'll only see the first finger and the thumb, and you'll only see the fingers curling up underneath, so I don't have to get my actual fist pose perfect. I actually just tried to rotate it on the wrong bone. That's the right one there. So rotating on the X to curl the fingers. So because we actually put the constraints on all of our fingers, you'll see now that I want to bring that thumb up, but I can't actually rotate it on any axis other than the X. So you can actually click on the bones and you can actually press N on the right hand side of your screen there, which I'm going to do in a minute, I think. Yeah, press N, and then you can actually see the rotation constraints. Make sure you're on item, and you can see there, see we've locked the Z and the Y axis. So you can actually unlock them, and then you'll be able to actually rotate that bone on the other axis. So I'm just going to rotate it so it kind of comes up a little bit more. Just curl these fingers a little bit more. I just want to see the actual very tips of the fingers down there so it actually looks like a fist. It's not perfect, you can spend a lot more time on it obviously, but it looks okay for the purposes of this tutorial. I'm just going to try to fix up this wrist. The wrist looks a bit deformed there, the way I've got it bent back, so you probably won't see that, but I'm just going to try to fix it up just slightly. Okay, so as you can see here, I've actually got that on frame 91, and I don't want that. I actually want to drag that to roughly about 100, so about halfway through the animation. And now we go to the very end of the animation. You can just test out the animation just by dragging this up and down. I actually didn't have all the bones selected, so I didn't drag all the keyframes to 100. So the keyframes will only show up in the editor if you actually have that bone selected. So if you've got all the bones selected, you'll actually be able to see all the keyframes you placed. So if you see keyframes disappearing, it's because you don't have the bone you animated selected, okay? So you just got to make sure that you have all the keyframes. So we're just going to go to the actual default pose again. So I'm going to get that by clicking on the first frames in the action editor, pressing Shift D, and then just dragging them up. Or you could use the pose, the default pose in the pose library if you wanted. So there you go. So we start off, we've got our idle animation, and then we've got our punch, and then back to the default pose. So the next two animations are going to be really simple ones. These don't have to be perfect by any means. All we're going to want to do is have the hands go down, and we only need about 10 or 9 frames. I think we're going to use about 9 frames here. So change it to 120 for your end frame, and basically this one is going to be, just say that you've got your hands equipped and you want to switch to a weapon. You want the hands to actually go down so you can't see them, as if they're going down to pick something up out of your backpack or something like that, or your inventory. So very simple. So as you can see, we've got the end of our... Oh, see, I actually just... Sorry. I actually just animated those on the frames that were supposed to be my default frames. So you actually animate this one, you're supposed to animate this one on frame 120, and I actually did it on 110, which was our default pose after we had our punch animation. So I've just figured that out, I think. And yeah, I'm going to actually put it back to the default pose. So yeah, make sure you actually drag up to 120, and then you want to do your pose with your arms actually all the way down. And as I said, you're not going to see this, so it doesn't matter, but um, I don't know why I'm spending so long on it. It's really not important. As long as your arms move down like that, that's it. Done. So now all we need to do is do the animation where the hands come back up again. So just say you had a weapon or a gun in your hand and you wanted to switch to your hands. You don't want your hands just to appear in front of you. You want them to actually come up from underneath into the actual default pose. So we can do another 10 frames. So change your end frame to 130 and then make sure you drag to 130. And all we need to do is key in our default pose. So if we just go to our default pose in the pose library, make sure we've selected all the bones, click on that, and our animation is done. So just see our hands are down, and then when we move forward, they come up. So we'll just run through all the animations again. You can just press play from the start and you can see them all playing out. So you notice if you look at our punch animation in the actual viewport with the arms, it doesn't look like he's punching out very far, but if you look at it in the actual viewport on the left that you're going to see through the camera, it actually looks a lot better. So don't worry too much about how it looks in the actual viewport where we pose our arms. You're more worried about how it looks on the left hand side. Okay guys, so if you would like the actual project files here, just support me on Patreon and you can actually go ahead and download them off itch.io. So I hope you guys enjoyed the tutorial. I'm sorry about the voiceover. Hopefully it's not too bad, but yeah, the next one we'll sort out and have it working properly again. So yeah, thanks for watching guys, and I really hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.